Today I'm making a big batch of Sunday sauce just like my mom would, except we're taking some shortcuts without sacrificing any flavor. We're using strategic canned tomato products to save time without sacrificing any of that traditional Sunday sauce flavor. Fried meatballs, brown sausage, and a smooth sauce that eats like it was simmered all day. For the full ingredient list, check the description box below, but enough talking, let's get cooking. The first step to getting this recipe going, or any recipe, is to get our prep done. So for the sauce, we're gonna put in a carrot for a little sweetness, because I don't like to put sugar in my sauce. That's where the carrot comes in. An onion for a little bit of flavor, some garlic, which is gonna go in the meatballs and in the sauce, and some parsley that's gonna go inside the meatballs. So I'm gonna put a small dice on this onion. And the reason I want it small is because I want this to cook pretty fast, and at the same time, we're gonna blend the onions and the carrots into the sauce. So I don't want the immersion blender to have to work with like really large chunks. So I'm gonna cut this pretty small. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna peel and shred the carrot. So now with my box shredder, I'm gonna shred this carrot, and I'm gonna do it right over the paper towel just to make transporting it a lot easier. Next, we're gonna peel and we're gonna mince some garlic. So the garlic is gonna go in the sauce and in the meatballs. So we're gonna have to use the whole head of garlic with all the cloves. So let me show you a way that I like to clean garlic when I wanna clean the whole head of garlic all together. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to expose as many of the cloves as possible. And I'm just gonna peel off as much of the skin or paper as I can. Now I'm gonna take two bowls that are about the same size, and they gotta be like hard bowls, or like metal or ceramic. Now I'm gonna take the whole head of garlic, and I'm just gonna break up the cloves inside the bowl. And I don't need to be really exact when I do this. I just got to get them to be a little bit separated. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the one bowl on top of the other. I'm going to pinch the bowls together, and I'm going to shake really vigorously for like 30 seconds until the garlic gets bounced off of the bowls enough that the skin loosens up from the garlic. This gets a little loud too, so just a warning. So now you can see a lot of the garlic is already cleaned, and any of the ones that still have the skin on them, I could probably just take out a couple and then just give it like another shake. And see, the paper kind of comes off, and all you got to do is just like gently peel it off. And I would only do this if I need to do a lot of garlic cloves, because I still got to wash the two bowls. So if it's only a couple of cloves, I won't do it this way. It doesn't save any time. But if I need to do all this garlic, which is how many cloves we got here? 14 garlic cloves. That would have took a little bit more time than just washing these two bowls. So I'm going to reserve 3 garlic cloves for our meatballs. So I'll just take 3. I'm going to set these aside, and I'm going to leave them whole. And the rest of these we're going to put a fine mince on. So we're gonna trim off the root end, and now crush and mince. Again, you won't see any garlic in the final dish. So once I get it minced up enough that I know it'll cook down and the immersion blender will get to it, that's about far enough I need to take it. And I like a really garlic heavy Sunday sauce. So if you think this is too much garlic, you could tone it down, but for me, I want it to look like too much garlic, and then I know it's enough. The last thing we gotta prep is some parsley. So here I'm just gonna pull the leaves off the parsley. No parsley stems in the meatballs. No parsley stems in food for that matter. You know, that's a big pet peeve of mine. So anytime I see people not pulling the leaves off of parsley stems and putting the parsley stems in the final dish, that's not for me, and that's not something I'm about. And this isn't being used as a garnish. This is going in the meatballs. So we gotta get this really fine, because you don't wanna see giant chunks of parsley. Like, if you put this inside your meatball, I don't know what that is. That's way too big. And that's just like lazy, sloppy cooking. So, you know, we're gonna take a lot of shortcuts with this sauce, but one of the shortcuts we're not gonna take is not cutting up the parsley enough. That's what you wanna see. Nice, fine, no big chunks. Now let's take a look at the meat that we're gonna put in these meatballs. So here I got 3 different kinds of meat, which is a very traditional thing to make meatballs out of. So I got 2 pounds of ground beef, 1 pound of ground pork, and 1 pound of ground veal. This is the ratio that I like. Some people like to do it very equally, so like equal amounts, beef, pork, and veal. The pork and the veal are gonna bring additional flavors, but I like the main flavor to be a beef meatball. I also like to mix my meatballs in this like wide hotel pan. So if you have like a bowl that's like wide and shallow, that's probably a little bit better than something that's deeper. And the reason is when we're mixing the meatballs, I want to spread the ingredients over the top so we don't have to do a lot of mixing. The more you mix the meatballs, the tougher they get. The less you mix them, but they come out uniform, the less tough that they're gonna get. Here, what I like to do is just like take my meat and just like break it up into little chunks. So we're not doing any mixing yet, but we don't have to start with just like the hard, large pieces of the ground meat. So just take it and breaking it up by hand. And I'll do that for all 4 pounds of meat in here. And you could scale this recipe up or down. Just think about like the ratios of like double beef to the pork and the veal. So 1 unit pork and veal, 2 units beef. And doing little extra steps like this and spreading it out, using the wider pan so we don't have to do so much mixing. These are the difference in between meatballs that are a little tough and chewy to meatballs that are like tender and just they fall apart in your mouth or on the fork and feel really good. Because I think one of the best parts about meatballs is that nice, fluffy, break apart texture. So the next ingredient is gonna be some panko breadcrumbs, but I'm not gonna put these in right away, because let me show you what I'm gonna do with these. So we're gonna use about 2 cups of the breadcrumbs. And breadcrumbs were originally used to stretch out the meat, so we don't have to use so much meat in the meatballs. So you could take some breadcrumbs and you could take a little bit of meat and make it a little bit more. And I think like necessity is the mother of all invention. So like when they did this, they didn't even know at the time, whoever the first Italians were to make these style of meatballs, that they were making them really tender and they were gonna give it great texture by adding in the breadcrumbs into the meat. So now we're gonna take 1 cup of whole milk and add it to the breadcrumbs so they can soak up a little bit this milk. So I'm gonna take the breadcrumbs and I'm just gonna pour the milk right in there, nice and slow, because as I pour it in, it'll just start to absorb and sink in. And this is gonna allow the breadcrumbs to soak up the milk so they get nice and soggy with moisture and flavor. So I'm gonna put this aside. It's gonna be the last thing I'm gonna throw in there just to give it plenty of time to let the breadcrumbs soak up the milk. Next step, we're gonna put in some Pecorino Romano cheese. You can use Parmesan cheese. Pecorino's got a little bit more sharpness to it, and this is like super powdered and dry, and it's the perfect cheese to go inside the meatballs. And we're gonna put about 1 cup of the cheese in there. I like to put about a half a cup for every 2 pounds of meat. We're kind of spreading it out so I don't have to do a whole lot of mixing. Next, we're gonna put 1 egg for every pound of meat. So we got 4 pounds of meat in here. We're gonna do 4 eggs. And eggs plus the breadcrumbs and the meat are gonna help bind the meatballs. Next, we're gonna shred in the garlic cloves that we peeled. I like to use my microplane because I want it to get super shredded so the garlic disperses its flavor into the meatballs. You can use the small holes in the tower shredder that we used to shred the carrot, but this is gonna be best. You can see how the microplane turns the garlic into almost a paste. Let's say you wanted to skip this step and use the paste garlic inside the tube. That would be totally fine too, but fresh is always gonna be best. Next, we're gonna put in that chopped parsley. Pinch or 2 of salt. Remember, we don't have to put a lot of salt in here because the pecorino cheese does have a lot of salt. And some fresh ground black pepper. And now we're gonna put in the breadcrumbs soaked with the milk. You can see how like the milk has been absorbed by the breadcrumbs. If you put them in separate, you don't get the same texture. So now with my hands, I'm gonna try to work pretty quickly and give this a mix. And I'm always working from the bottom up because when we're mixing stuff tends to get stuck at the bottom. So when you're mixing stuff and you're just hanging out at the top, the stuff at the bottom is the same. If there's any big cheese chunks, you just break those up. But I think that adds to the beauty of the meatball. And I think that's about as far as I want to take it, and this looks pretty good. So now let's start rolling our meatballs. So you could work off a baking sheet or you could work off a large platter like this. So now what I'll do is I'll just take small amounts of the mixture and start to roll them up. A bigger meatball is not a better meatball. Meatballs you want to be about like golf ball sized, maybe slightly larger, but not much larger than that. When meatballs get a little too large, especially when you're doing it in this style, you lose a lot of texture because you want to make sure that the outside to the inside is pretty uniform. So you see, this is probably just a hair bigger than a golf ball. If you want to be really exact, you can get the scale out, but I don't think Nona was using the scale scale. So we're gonna try to just do this by eye and by hand as best as we can. And also try not to like compress the meatball. Sometimes I see people doing this where they're squeezing the meatball. That's just gonna make the meatball dense. You want like little air pockets in there. So if you see like a meatball like this that's got like little air craggles in there and it's not like completely like round and smooth on the outside, that's okay. Not only is that okay, that's what you're looking for. And as you're doing this kind of work, you start to develop like a feel. Like you'll know when you grab enough meat, you'll know what feels like too much, you'll know what feels like not enough. And I'm doing more rolling than squeezing because if there's little air pockets in there, that's totally fine. Again, it's kind of almost like what you want, and that's what's gonna give that meatball that nice like break apart texture. And if this looks like too many meatballs, that's the whole idea behind Sunday sauce. You know, Sunday sauce implies that you're cooking for a lot of people who are coming over and you want plenty of food to eat, because there's nothing more sinful in an Italian American tradition than people that come over and they leave hungry. So you want to make sure that everybody's got plenty of meatballs. We're also going to put some sausage in here, so everybody's got plenty of sausage to eat, but the meatballs are the star, and you want to make sure that there's plenty. You're much better off having too many than not enough. One of the great parts about this recipe is that meatballs and sauce with the sausage, it freezes wonderfully. So if you have extra, that's kind of like the goal. You can freeze this, and then on a busy weeknight when you don't want to cook, or maybe it's a lazy weekend and you're out all weekend, you come home for dinner and you don't know what to make, you just go into the freezer, grab a container of meatballs and sauce and some sausages, and while you're changing your clothes, dinner's getting ready on the stove. So our meatballs are rolled, everything's prepped for the sauce. Let's head over to the stove and let's start building our sauce. The first thing I want to take a look at is our pot. So we're going to be using, I guess this is like a 16-quart stock pot or sauce pot. This is probably like the standard like big pot that everybody has. And every good Sunday sauce has some type of pork product in there. Here we're gonna use sweet Italian sausage because this is gonna help cut down on our cook time. A lot of times you can use pork ribs or pork neck bones or pork shank. I like to use the sweet Italian sausage because we can get that pork flavor into the sauce, and at the same time, we're cutting down on our time a lot. I'm gonna turn my pot over like a medium high heat. I'm also gonna add just a little bit of oil to the pot, and the sausages can go in when the pot is cold, because as the pot heats up, it'll start to brown the sausages. Usually I can fit 2 pounds of sausage in the bottom of this pot and do it in a single batch. And if it's a little crowded at first, that's fine. These sausages will shrink back. You can already hear that they're starting to cook into brown. Neither the meatballs nor the sausage need to be cooked all the way through. We're just gonna brown them on the outside because a lot of the final cook's gonna happen in the sauce. So don't be so worried about making sure that the sausage is cooked all the way through, because you don't need it to. And you can see this is about as brown as you really want to get it, because now we're getting that nice flavor on the outside and we're starting to develop like a little bit of fond on the bottom of the pot. So remember, anytime you're browning meat, you're adding additional deep flavors that weren't there before. So this is getting a deeper flavor than if you would just throw the sausages in the pot. So you can skip the browning step if you want to save some time, but remember, you're sacrificing big flavor on that. So once we got a little bit of color on both sides of the sausage, we're going to take the sausages out and lower the heat in the pot. So we don't want to get any color on our onions. So what I like to do is just take the pot off the heat for a little bit, let it cool down, and then we're going to add a little bit more oil and our onions. So now in the pot that we brown the sausage, I'm going to add a little bit more olive oil, and we're going to add our onions and our carrots. My tool of choice here is going to be a flat-edged wooden spatula, so I can scrape the bottom, because we don't want anything to brown on the bottom when we're cooking the sauce. And here I'm trying to reclaim all those flavors from the brown sausage. So I want to do this over a low heat because we do not want any color on these onions. We don't want to caramelize them. We just want to soften them up a little bit. So over like a low to medium low heat, but we shouldn't see any browning on the onions. So we'll cook these for a couple minutes till the onions get translucent. Let's take a look at the tomato products that are going to go inside this quick Sunday sauce. So first up is going to be some tomato paste. So tomato paste is a raw tomato product. It's concentrated tomato flavor, and it's got a deep umami flavor to it. So this is going to go in with the agar, like the onions and the carrots, and we're going to mix that in first. Next up, we're going to put our crushed tomatoes. So this is whole tomatoes that are raw and then crushed. They got some big chunks to it, but we're gonna blend everything so we're not gonna have any chunks in. If you wanted to make the sauce a little chunky, you could just reserve one of the cans and just put it in after, but here we're going after a smooth sauce. The next one is gonna be the one that's gonna save us some time. So I can put strained tomatoes, or I could put this tomato sauce, and this is actually a cooked tomato product. So once it says tomato sauce, you can assume that this is seasoned and it's cooked, so it's gonna cut down on our cook time. If I was gonna use the pork ribs or maybe the pork neck bones and I wanted a longer cook time on the sauce and we did want to cook this for 3, 4, 5 hours, then I might want to use a strained tomato that's called passata. But here we're going to cut down because the meatballs don't need a lot of cook time, the sausages don't need a lot of cook time, so we're going to use a cooked tomato product to cut into the time so we get the right flavors with the right consistency and without overcooking our meat. If at any time anything looking dry in the pot, just add just a touch of oil. Remember, dry pots, things burn. You got oil in there, things cook. So now once the onions have started to soften and they become translucent, I'm gonna add in our garlic. I'm gonna cook the garlic for only about like 30 seconds until it becomes like nice and fragrant, does not need a lot of time to cook. So now we're gonna put in our first canned tomato product. We're gonna put in 1 small 6-ounce can of the tomato paste. So now I'm gonna work the tomato paste into the onions, the garlic, and the carrots and create like a mixture of the paste with these vegetables, and I'm gonna let that cook down for a little bit too. I almost want this to like fry like on the bottom and create nice flavor, because remember, the tomato paste is a raw tomato product, so it needs to cook a little bit. And because it's nice and concentrated and it's not so wet, it has the ability to caramelize and add more flavors. And I know I'm talking a lot about the sauce and I could just show you the ingredients and put it in, but the technique and the why is really what separates a good sauce from a great sauce. At this point, we'll do a little bit of seasoning. So we'll add a pinch of salt or 2 and some fresh ground black pepper. We're gonna add more of these a little later, but you wanna layer in your seasoning and all the components. Like I look at this mixture as one component of the sauce. And you wanna make sure that this is seasoned and we're not just doing all of our seasoning at the end. And you can start to smell once the tomato paste starts to go from raw to cooked. So now we're gonna add in our crushed tomatoes. So these are a little chunky, but again, we're gonna blend everything so it's not gonna be so chunky. And right here, I'm gonna put 1 can, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of water to the inside of the can to help clean out the can, but also give us a little bit of liquid so we can blend this. So now we're gonna give this a little mix. My next step is I'm gonna take this immersion blender, I'm gonna blend everything while this is still warming up. If you like a chunky sauce, you can totally skip this step. But here on a Sunday sauce, I want like a smoother sauce, and I don't wanna see the chunks of onion and the carrot and the garlic. I want it to all blend in there and have that nice smooth consistency. So we're gonna add those crushed tomatoes, and now we're gonna blend everything to get rid of all the chunks, but all the flavor stays in there. If you don't have an immersion blender, you can skip this step, or you could just empty out the pot into a blender and then dump it in, but I think that's a little excessive. So if you don't have an immersion blender, get one, and if you don't want to get one, just skip the step and deal with a chunky sauce, and that's still pretty good too. I really like that. And here I don't go totally nuts. I just kind of like get rid of like all like the big chunks. I give it a spin or 2, and that's about it. It doesn't need to be super smooth. We just want to get rid of most of the big chunks. Now here I'm going to add the cans of tomato sauce, and you can see how smooth it is compared to the crushed tomatoes. And so I'm gonna reserve 1 can that's uncleaned, and I'm gonna keep it, and I'll show you in a little bit once we make our meatballs what we're gonna do with this. So now I'm gonna season with a little bit more salt, some fresh ground black pepper, and a pinch out of the Talenti container of this dried oregano from my mom's garden. Maybe 2 pinches. Now we're gonna give this a mix, and you can see our pot is only filled up about halfway up with sauce. You wouldn't wanna go much further than that, because once we add the sausages and the meatballs, they have to go someplace, so that's gonna really bring up the amount of liquid inside this pot. So now let's add our sausages back in, and any drippings that have collected. We're gonna get those sausages nestled in the bottom. You can even see just adding the sausage that already brought up the level of liquid inside the pot. So now we're gonna take this, we're gonna put our cover on, and we're gonna shift it over to a side burner. With meatballs, we can do three things. We can fry them, we can bake them, or we can drop them right into the sauce. A lot of people like dropping them right into the sauce because they say it gives the best texture. And I do think the texture is good, but it doesn't have that browned flavor on the outside, and I think that's really what makes a good meatball and makes a good Sunday sauce. So I personally like to fry them. I have baked them before, and baking's okay, but you're not gonna get the same texture on the outside as a little shallow fry in some olive oil. So I'm gonna heat this pan up over a medium heat. Now I'm gonna add some olive oil to this hot pan, and I'm trying to just cover the bottom of the pan. A 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch of olive oil, not much more than that. So we're doing like a shallow fry, not a deep fry. And now about 12 at a time, I'm gonna brown these meatballs on 2 sides. I find I can usually add about 12, maybe a little bit more before the pan gets overcrowded. And you can hear as soon as I put the meatballs in there, they've already started to sizzle. And sometimes I like to just give them just like a little reshape. The best tool that you can use is going to be a fork to flip the meatballs. And you wouldn't want to do this in a non-stick pan because you want to use the fork to kind of scrape the bottom of the pan. So here I'm using my Hex-Clad pan, which has like some slightly non-stick properties, but it's more like a stainless steel pan than anything. So after about 90 seconds, I'm going to give them a little bit of a flip, and this is what you're looking for, this like nice light browning. I don't want like a hard, super hard browning like we would see on a steak, but I'm just gonna work around the pan in the order that I put them in, and this is about as brown as you want them to be. And while your meatballs are browning, periodically you wanna go to your sauce and give it a mix, because this is a very large pot of sauce. You always wanna take the flat part and work the bottom, because if you don't, stuff's gonna burn on the bottom, and we want this to kind of like heat up evenly and then cook pretty evenly. And when you're doing this, you should be working meatball sauce, meatballs. After about 90 seconds on each side, you can see we got color on both sides of the meatball. The color's not very deep, it's just brown enough. Now we'll use our fork to transfer the meatballs one at a time into our sauce. If your oil starts splattering, it's probably up a little bit too much. And so now, if the oil is still good, we'll go right back, second batch of meatballs. And be very gentle when the meatballs are still uncooked, because they'll simmer and they'll tighten up a little bit, but you don't want to break the meatballs or be too aggressive with them when they're still raw on the inside. And just like pancakes, like as you go, your batches will start to get better because your timing will start to get better. And like the pan just heats up a little bit more evenly. You can see how really nicely, evenly brown this batch is. Now you got a choice. You can discard the oil with the little burnt bits of the meatballs, or you could take just a little bit of water and one of the cans of sauce, and you can pour that in there. I like to let it cool down a little bit so we don't get too much splattering. And now I'll take my spatula and I'll scrape the bottom and get all those little burnt bits. I think this is a really nice touch to get all that flavor in there and clean the bottom of that pan. So now we'll take that and pour that right into the sauce. No flavors left behind. So now I'm gonna let this simmer over a low heat for about an hour to an hour and a half. Every 10-15 minutes or so, I will scrape the bottom just to make sure that we're not getting any burning of the sauce on the bottom. The whole energy behind this particular Sunday sauce recipe is that it's fast, and after about an hour, hour and a half, you're really not getting much more texture or flavor in the sauce or on the meatballs when you do it in this style, especially when you're using that canned sauce and you're not using any raw tomato products. So this gigantic pot of sauce has been going for about 90 minutes. Just gotta add one more ingredient. So the last thing we got to add is some fresh basil. I always save this for the end. I see people sometimes put basil in and cook it along with the sauce. I would never do that. Basil turns black and it releases its flavor almost immediately into the sauce. So the sauce is hot, so let's just peel off the leaves off this basil. And so now let's just slice it up. So we'll take the basil leaves and we'll stack as many as we can. So we'll take a bunch of basil leaves, we'll roll them up, and now from here, slice them. And the same way that I love garlic, I love basil. So if it looks like too much basil, it's a gigantic pot. We're probably gonna have to add a lot. I'm gonna go a little overboard and cut up all this basil. And if you don't have fresh, you can use dried, but that's one of the things where it's not even close to equal. The dried will get you there a little bit and it'll get you the flavors, but it'll be nothing like adding the fresh stuff. So now let's put in our fresh basil and we'll give that a mix. And just the heat of the pot alone is enough to wilt the basil and get all the flavors into the sauce. Now, it doesn't need a lot of time, maybe about just like 5 minutes of sitting in this hot pot. The basil leaves will start to wilt. They won't turn black or brown, and they'll give all the flavor that we want into that sauce. And this Sunday sauce is done. So let's take a couple of these meatballs. And look how amazing these meatballs and sauce look. The sauce looks like it has like the perfect consistency. And let's not forget one of those sausages that we put in there. A little extra sauce on top. And now right before we try it, let's shred on some fresh grated Parmigiano Reggiano. So now let's cut into one of these meatballs. Look how like tender that meatball looked. Like, see how it's not dry? If I give it like a little bit of squish, it's got that nice like spring back. This is gonna be an epic bite. Now that's a good meatball. The texture is perfect. The flavor is outstanding. I made these meatballs for Christmas, and I had 2 elderly Italian ladies. One of them was my mother and told me that the meatballs were excellent. So if they passed the old Italian lady test, 2 ladies who are called Nonna told me that my meatballs were excellent. They are, and I'll tell you this, I agree with them. These are so good. Let's eat the other meatball. And again, let me show you how just like fork tender it is. Like, look at the moisture on the inside. If I give that like a little bit of squeeze, you can see that the meatball is still really, really juicy, and it's got that like nice spring back. I think anybody with like Italian heritage needs to master sauce and meatballs. And once you got that, you know that the next generation is safe, that they're gonna eat good pasta, good meatballs, and a delicious sauce. This is fantastic. Let's also not forget about that sausage. Again, the sausage, nice and juicy. It's not overcooked, because if you cook the sausage for like 3 hours, like you would cook the pork shoulder, or like you would cook the pork neck, it would be too dry. This is juicy and delicious. I could eat the sauce just all by itself. It's that good. If you like this recipe, hit like, drop me a comment, let me know what you think about the sauce, the meatballs. If you make them, let me know how they come out. And if this is your first time here, subscribe to my channel, get the notification bell on so you can find out when I drop new recipe videos. If you're into meatballs, but you want an alternative, check out my turkey meatballs. Little different recipe, kind of similar, but it shows you how you can get the same flavors or similar good texture from turkey and not have to use the beef, pork, or a veal like we did in this recipe. I will see you there. Thank you.